Hello everybody and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program, where we've been working on the landing system for this fuel production module, and it's somewhat bespoke to the fuel production module right now, and I'd like to actually change that. So the way that I want to do that, I think, is the way that we've done this in reality. I was thinking about it because our fundamental problem right now is one of weight distribution, right? So if we look at our center of mass and our center of thrust here, and this is with this poodle having no thrust whatsoever. So this poodle is discounted. This is our current center of mass versus thrust. And we want this to be as aligned as possible. So that's great, right? It's pretty aligned. It's not perfectly aligned, I don't think, but it's close enough. But is it? As this fuel begins to change, we can see we've got a arbitrary amount of fuel in this tank right now. If we have no fuel in this tank, that happens. So that's a bit of a problem, right? What if our fuel was out here? What if we had this amount of fuel? Well, we're going to have a random or effectively random amount of fuel, an unpredictable amount of fuel. So what we need to do then is we need to make a sky crane. That's the solution here. So what we need to do is we need to take out the liquid fuel and oxidizer like this. And we need to say, this is our unfueled center of mass. Assuming we have no fuel in here at all, this is the center of mass. We're going to need to remove these twitches, and we're going to have to do this on all sides here. And you can see that's wildly fluctuating our center of thrust right now. That is fully expected. So we're going to get rid of all of these twitches. There we go. And to be clear, our center of thrust is very awkward down there now. To be clear, this is, at this point, going to be a much more reproducible solution for all of our other vehicles. Because now it doesn't matter what our weight distribution is. As long as our parachutes hold us in a decent vector as we come in. And that is actually something that we'll need to test here. So with this completely empty and no fuel, no retro thrusters, where does this put us in terms of our parachute mass? I think it's going to be a little too much on this side. Our aerodynamic overlay doesn't really help us here, unfortunately, because the parachutes don't count for that. So we don't exactly know what the state of that's going to be, but we've got 4 parachutes here, we've got 2 parachutes here, and our center of mass is here. So I think that we're going to have this side pointing somewhat down, but we need to determine how exactly that's going to go. And this thermal control system needs to move. 100%, that needs to go into a different location. It can be placed back here later, but for now, I'm going to put it up over here. And it might still be fine up here. We're going to have the heat transfer into this Jumbo 64 fuel tank. It's probably fine to have it here, but for now, we're going to need to do that because we're going to need to take this center of mass and put our sky crane in right where that center of mass is. So what that ends up meaning is that we're going to need to put in a Clampatron docking port. I'm going to go with a Junior right on top of that center of mass, like that. Just exactly centered, or as exactly centered as we can get for now. And then we can put in a second docking port Junior there. And then we can put another fuel tank up here. And this fuel tank is going to be a fairly small one. I want this to be something like a T400, like that. And then we're going to want to have not cubic octagonal struts. I want modular girder segments here. And I'm going to have these be at a bit of a jaunty angle. The main problem here is that we may run into some issues. Okay. Yeah, we may run into some issues here with our twitches causing some overheats here. So we can have this sky crane be very, very far extended, kind of like this. Maybe even a little further. like that. And note how this isn't changing the center of mass at all. This is because this is right in the center of mass and completely mirrored. Everything is canceling out. So that's perfect. I do want to put a roundified fuel tank on top here, something like that. And then we can put some twitches on here. So I'm going to do a set of twitches right... These are not the rotations that I thought they would be. There we go. Right here. And 4, it might be enough. I'm going to go for 8 here just to be on the safe side. So we're going to put a set right here, like that. So in theory, that should be reasonably good, although I'm noting that this is at a bit more of a jaunty angle than I'd hoped, and I'm going to put it right out at the edge. So this one, that was not what I wanted to do. Undo that. Grab this one right out at the edge, like that. Okay, so we've got ourselves a bit of a sky crane here, right? The idea here is we're just going to gently lower ourselves down, but I'm going to have the liquid fuel and oxidizer here actually be... Well, we want to have the ability to drain any remaining liquid fuel and oxidizer from here, right? This tank is empty, and then this is going to be our deorbiting fuel, and then any of that fuel that remains after we finish our deorbit burn, that is what's going to get pulled up into here. And hopefully we'd have enough space to do that, because if we didn't, that would cause us a weight distribution problem. Okay, so this is the overall concept here. So we're going to need to have... Well, these can all be in the same stage. That's fine. This crossfeed is enabled. That is reasonably good as well. This needs to be unthrust limited, of course, and we're going to have to run this test from orbit here, because we have to know that we have enough space in here to transfer the remaining fuel, right? So let's save this. Let's put this out on the pad. And this is a fundamental redesign of our retro rockets for sure, but this should be a lot better. And this isn't exactly a sky crane idea, but it's inspired by sky cranes. So the way that sky cranes work is they bring the craft to a halt a little bit above the surface, hover there, lower the vehicle down via a tether, and then detach the tether and fly off and explode. Ah! Struts. We're going to need struts. I could tell that already. So let's head back to the vehicle assembly here. In this one, we're not trying to land it in quite the same way, right? What we're trying to do here is, and we can actually... We can move the parachutes to be on top of the sky crane. That will adjust the center of mass, which we can see is back here due to the fuel being up here. So we want to drain out all of this fuel, like that. We currently have 6 stroke chutes, and we could bring that down, in theory, to 4 drogue chutes. So the drogue chute, all of the chutes would end up being on the sky crane, right? I am wondering what happens here if we have 4 drogue chutes and then 12 main chutes, all on the sky crane here. This is more chutes than we would have had on the actual craft here. And let's see what that does to our weight distribution, because we want to make sure that this is still relatively intact, right? Actually, that's still very, very centered. So that looks good. There's still a chute here. I think we can maybe nudge it over ever so slightly. Let's turn off snapping for right now. Yeah, we can definitely nudge this over to be about right there. To be very, very close to centered. I don't know if that's perfectly centered, but it's probably close enough. Okay, struts. That's what we came here for. So let's go ahead and put in strut connectors, and those are just going to go from here. I want them to connect on top here. So let's actually do like this, and then they're going to go down like over here. Sure, that seems fine. We just want that to be nice and sturdy for now, and at least until such a time as we detach the sky crane. Okay, so the fuel needs to be fueled up. That's going to affect our center of mass significantly, but that fuel is going to be pulled up into the sky crane itself. And this is more chutes than we had previously, so we will see what our landing velocity ends up looking like. And like I said, this is a much more reusable solution for all of our craft. If we need it to be longer, we can just add in more modular girder segments. That changes nothing other than the overall mass of the device, right? Another thing I'm a little concerned about is this all wiggling and not being very sturdy. We could run, in order to try to prevent that, we could run a strut from here to about here, just to try to give some rigidity for that. We'll see how that feels. Okay, so we'll save that, put that out on the pad. And that's going to be very interesting for sure. I have no idea what our staging is. I didn't even look at that. We'll figure that out in a moment here. And of course, we're going to need to put this out in proper orbit. This is going to have to be at a minimum orbit here. So about 50 kilometers. And then we're going to decelerate it. We know that's going to be about 900 meters per second to burn in this engine. So that's absolutely fine. Looking at the staging, this staging actually looks perfect, remarkably so. So that looks good. Let's go ahead and put this out and give this a quick test. So we will set the orbit. We have to do from orbit here because our previous from orbit tests are currently invalidated. So that's the safety check. I'm going to drop this down to 37,0250. There we go. And we're going to set that orbit. No, override the safety check. 37,0250. Set that orbit. So that'll put us at an orbit theoretically of, yeah, just over 50 kilometers. That's perfect. This is exactly where we want to be. So we're going to need to move this to horizontal velocity minus, and we're going to need to burn off all of our horizontal speed. Now, we don't care exactly where we burn off this speed, but I want to come down on the day side just so we can see a little bit better. So we're going to warp around. We know that this is going to be a while because it's going to be stuck to 10x time warp. So I'm not going to make you sit through this. I'll be back in just a moment. Oof, that warping is so painful at 10x. We've still got like a minute left in it here. I've cleared the input blocker, so we're not going to have an input blocker. We should also extend our landing gear here. So we'll do so now. There we go. And we're going around to horizontal velocity minus. We're, of course, going to need to rotate this. And we can see we've got 947 meters per second in this right now. So we will see if we have enough fuel with this. And enough space to store the fuel here, because it's absolutely imperative that this land unfueled except for the sky crane, right? That is absolutely imperative, which is why we have to run the test from orbit for right now. So we don't really care where we're going to land. I'm just going to start up this burn right about now. I did not activate the engine. That would help. Oh, we have a chute here. Okay. That's going to throw things off a little bit here. I'm going to manually deactivate that chute, but first we need to commence this burn. So that looks good for now. We're no longer in orbital mode, and we're just getting rid of this horizontal speed. I'm not bothering with any sort of a maneuver for this. It really doesn't matter for right now. We're not trying to precision land. We've already proven that that's a thing. It's not a big deal. It's fine. Or at least semi-precision land. It doesn't have to be perfect, just close enough. So the question here is, what do these chutes slow us down to? And then the next question is, how do we sit? And then the next question after that is, how does the firing of these thrusters, of these retro rockets, end up going? That'll be very interesting, no doubt about that. We're not going to have a lot of fuel left over after this burn. So we might need to have some amount of fuel, perhaps the fuel in this hemispherical liquid fuel tank be full. We'll see. We've still got quite a lot of horizontal speed here. Still about 360 meters per second there. And so we're going to have like 90 meters per second left in this, which is theoretically enough. But it's not going to be a lot. But yeah, this parachute needs to be removed. There's no doubt about that. And I will manually deactivate this once we activate the stage, just to make sure it doesn't foul up our results. It's still messing with our weight distribution a little bit, though, but not tremendously. Okay, so we are just about done with this horizontal speed. We could let the atmosphere handle the rest of it, but for the moment, I'm just going to keep burning. 20 meters per second, 10, and about 1 meter per second. Let's just gently burn that down. So right about there. We're going almost entirely straight down. Let's put this in kill rot for right now. We need to shut down this engine, and I'm going to activate our next stage. So all of this is activated. We need to pull any fuel that is in here into this tank. So we'll get that moved. That'll change our weight distribution. You can see there's not a lot of fuel left over from that burn. So that's good to know. And all of these chutes are currently active, including this one. So I'm going to disarm that particular chute. We don't want it fouling up our results. We will remove it after we're done with this test. Okay, so we have a little bit of horizontal velocity. That's fine. We knew that that was going to build up. For the time being, I want to see how we're going to sit on the way down. So aerodynamics are going to probably try to pull us around. That's not that big of a deal as long as the chutes orient us correctly, which I think they should. Okay, we're accelerating right now, and yep, there we go. We're beginning to go engine first, which is not terribly surprising. This is fine as long as the chutes orient us back vertically. And a reaction wheel is trying to fight this, but it just can't. That's understood. It's completely fine. So we should be seeing these chutes firing in about 1 kilometer here, half a kilometer. Now, drogues are out. The drogues should be pulling us back up. There go all of the mains. That's a good orientation, or approximately good orientation. Okay, we're moving quite slowly. 14 meters per second. Okay, let's bring this down to the surface. It's going to take us a little bit to float on down. We're landing on a cliff, which is, you know, not ideal. This is not the landing terrain that we would choose in reality, but the question is this good enough? So we've got about 63 meters per second of fuel here. And how much burn time is that? 13 seconds of burn time. Okay. So we're moving at about 13 meters per second at this moment, and that's a pretty good result from these chutes. We're dead level, and I really like to see that. Of course, this terrain that we're coming down on is very, very not ideal. And that's understood. So we're going to start up our landing burn here shortly. I want to see how this is going to do. That's slowing us down quite a bit, actually. Okay, brakes on. I'm going to call that a successful landing considering where we're landed. I mean, it's a little awkward, but yeah, I'm going to call that successful. So at this point, the idea, and that was a very successful landing for that matter. That was not a qualified success like the others were. I'm going to call that one an unqualified success. That was a really good landing. Especially considering we're at like a, what is this, like a 45-degree angle? That was not bad. We were able to cushion that very significantly, and we used about 40 meters per second to do it. Maybe round that to like 50. We used about 50 meters per second to do it. So that's absolutely understood. That was a significant success. So the next goal here is to ditch the sky crane, right? So what we need to do is we just throttle up and undock this in very, 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 very quick succession. Like so. And off it goes. It's just going to fly off. It's going to run out of fuel very quickly. It is out of fuel now. and it's going to crash into the ground somewhere nearby. That's fine. It did its job. It is out of here. So yeah, I'm going to call that an unqualified success right there. That definitely proved that this system is significantly superior to what we were doing before. No doubt about that. So that's perfect. We can move this thermal control system later if we need to, but I think it's honestly fine where it is. I think it'll get the Convertitron cooled just fine. We definitely need to remove this parachute. That is wasted weight, and we do not want any wasted weight. So now the question is, how do we get it into that orbit, right? How do we get it into that orbit with enough fuel to do that? Well, one thing I want to do is I want to make sure that this hemispherical liquid fuel tank, this has got to have fuel on it. And we may want to have a fuel vent. Do we have access to those? I don't know that we do. Okay, so we want to have a fuel vent on this so that we can eject any fuel that we have in excess of what we need. But we may be able to just stow that away into something that we detach, because we're going to have to detach things on the way here, right? So how would we go about lifting this contraption into Kerbal orbit? That sky crane makes things a little bit awkward. No doubt about that. We could dock up that sky crane in orbit and attach it there. That's starting to get pretty complicated if we did that. We could try to lift it as is in a vertical orientation. That would definitely cause it to want to turn in one direction due to thrust offsetting. So that's absolutely a concern. But we know that there was some thrust offsetting. If we look at the center of mass here, yeah, we know that there's some thrust offsetting there, and that didn't cause a significant problem for this poodle. It's going to cause some efficiency loss. So we could attach that sky crane, like we could have the sky crane be out here at this docking port when we launch it, and then move it over to here in orbit. That would be maybe extremely tedious, perhaps. I think that would be extremely tedious. Because we would need, like, RCS systems here, and possibly here as well. Those could be attached here, though. Yeah, getting this thing into Kerbal orbit is going to be very interesting. And we'd want to do that changeover as late as possible. Because if this is attached up here, in line with the rest of these tanks, that's going to make lifting it very, very simple. However, it being here is a bit of a problem, right? We could use robotic parts and have the robotic parts be set up in such a way that they are originating here and can bend around this corner and go here and then be anchored into place once we're ready to do that. That's going to be a significant number of robotic parts and would require a Kerbal nearby to do the strutting in place once it gets in position. It would need to be strutted in here, and then it would need to be bended up over here, angled correctly, and then strutted into place at the correct point. That would also mean that this thermal control system would have to be moved, because it would be in the way for that. I'm going to have to think about how I want to do this. Lifting, like, this is a great solution once we get into Duna orbit, but it significantly complicates getting it to Duna orbit, right? There's no doubt about that. So that's definitely an interesting thing. No doubt about it. So this mass here is, of course, going to be primarily burned out. There'll be a little bit of extra mass that we can put into here. We know that once that's done, once this is all burned out, we're going to have our center of mass being here. And of course, there's this fuel here, but that doesn't actually change it all that much. So this does lift up this here, and this being offset in this axis is what makes that somewhat complicated, unless we lifted it in this orientation, with the booster attached right down here. That would be a lot of drag, but we might be able to just power through that. It's an interesting concept. We'll think about that next episode. You can leave your offerings to the engagement gods in the form of likes, comments, subscribes, and bell ringings, and a very special thank you to all of the channel members for making this video possible, including ALS Gamer, Dark Horse, Ethan Feldman, Upper Cumberland Gamers, Nick Smarty, Dimitri H, Punching the Microphone, The Lounge STL, and all the rest. And of course, you. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, you can click the join button down below the video, and as always, I will see you all next time.